Good morning, everybody. Happy New Year to you. Welcome to the new year and the new class today. Today's date is January 9th, 2023. BMN 521. BMN 521, Seminar in Buddhist Terminology. So that's our course this semester, this quarter. So as usual, you must have received the syllabus by now. And go through the syllabus, and today I'm going to give you a brief introduction of what we are going to look at in this class and what do I expect from you in our journey. So as far as in these classes, you have now gained so much knowledge on Buddhist studies. So I don't have to give you introduction so much. Anyhow, this course is looking at Buddhist texts in translations. You know, when I say Buddhist texts, there are different kinds of texts. Original texts. Originally, the Buddhist texts were in Pali, Sanskrit, Tibetan, Chinese, all those languages. When the Buddha was alive, he gave his discourses, he gave his teachings in his own language, believed to be Pali. Pali, Prakrit, whatever the language. The closest existing language is Pali. And later, of course, you know that Sanskrit also became a Buddhist language. You find Buddhist texts in Sanskrit, another language. And still later, you know, Chinese, Tibetan, and other languages. But in this course, we are looking at the English translations of Pali and Sanskrit texts. Of course, there are Tibetan and other things, but our main focus on Pali and Sanskrit texts in English translations. So we will be able to look at some texts. When I say texts, as I told you at the beginning, vast area, very vast area, huge number of texts, books. We are not going to pay attention to all of them, but some excerpts from those texts. And that will be our focus, and we are going to analyze, or we are going to search terminology, Buddhist terminology, as the, excuse me, I'm not in California right now. This is a different country actually. So anyhow, Buddhist terminology there are specific terms identify Buddhist teachings. So we have to be very careful in selecting terms, technical terms, in another language. This is the problem that faced by any translator from any language to any language. Selecting the correct term or terms, choosing the correct terms. So in Buddhist translations into English, Buddhist text translations to English, there's a big history. It is because of translations that Buddhism spread all over the world. This we have to understand before we jump into our subject. You know, Buddhism started in India and later it spread into different parts of the world, to Sri Lanka, you know, Burma, China, likewise, different countries. And later into Western countries as well. So when a religion, a Buddhist tradition in this sense, when it goes to a different culture, different setting, it has to be presented, it has to be explained in the existing language or existing pattern. So in order to do so, Buddhist texts have to be translated into that existing system. So here we are talking about the English translations. So that means we are not talking about Chinese or Tibetan translations, but English translations. When it comes to English translation, it means introduction of Buddhism to Western countries. When Buddhism was introduced into Western culture, how the problem of the challenge of translating the Buddhist texts, finding terms, finding technical terms, translating the technical terms into a different language. This is the challenge. So you know that in the history, Sri Lanka was under the British colonialists invaded Sri Lanka in the 18th century. And towards the end of the 18th century, beginning of 19th century, throughout 19th century, actually, the officials of the English government in Sri Lanka, they found the valuable Buddhist texts in Pali, original language, because those texts were preserved in Sri Lankan temples, centers of education, and these officials, officers of the English government, they came across with these valuable texts, which they thought they were valuable. They were really interested in them, and they wanted to understand what is in there, what these texts say. And in order to understand them, they had to learn the original language, the Pali language. And then they thought it's so valuable that they should translate them into their own language, which is English. And that's how Buddhist terms evolved, or Buddhist terminology came into existence. Now you understand that Pali Buddhist terms, when you are going to present them to the Western world, the earliest scholars or the translators, they had to find terms in English language. Understand? Because this is challenging thing. Now, of course, those terms are there. We know those terms. They have become standard now. But at the beginning, it was a big challenge. What kind of terms that we are going to use in English language to convey the meaning of certain Buddhist terms, Buddhist technical terms, Buddhist concepts, the Buddhist teachings, to convey the meaning in a different language, in English. They had to come up with some specific terms. That is what we are going to examine in this course. What kind of terms they have evolved, they have developed, they have selected in order to convey the Buddhist teachings into the Western world. Okay, that is our area in this class. So expect in the course, in the future classes, we will be looking at, you are learning a lot of English words to identify Buddhist teachings, Buddhist concepts, Buddhist ideas, teachings. Some of the terms, of course, now they have become English terms, some Buddhist terms, like say, for instance, karma. Karma has become an English term now. Nirvana, original Buddhist term, has become an English term right now. But most of the other terms are not like that. So we have to find certain English words to express the meaning of Buddhist idea, Buddhist teaching. So that's the area that we are going to cover in this class. So we will be able to read some of the passages, some of the text translations, and we'll be looking at the original text and also the little bit of translation in order to gather the terminology, Buddhist terminology. So this is a textual journey, a little bit not that interesting, but let's try to make it interesting, okay? And as usual in the class, basically we have a lecture, and then you have to do a lot of research. This is a seminar, right? So you have to participate in the learning, expanding your knowledge. Online, you can do a lot of research, and I will point out certain places where you have to read and other things. There'll be a lecture and then homework assignment as usual. You have to submit your homework assignment before the beginning of the next class, next week, following week, and then there'll be a midterm and also final. The syllabus, you see how your work is evaluated, how your homework is evaluated, how your midterm and the final will be evaluated. All those things are in the syllabus. Very important thing is that you have to do your homework. and also do the 2 exams. If you fail to do so, then there'll be problem as usual. Okay. So now today, this is the rough introduction to the class. I will not expand today's lecture so much, just the introduction. So now you have to do this thing this week. What are Buddhist texts? Where do you find them? In what languages? Buddhist, you know, the Pali Canon, very famous thing, or the Tripitaka. That's a Buddhist term, right? Tripitaka or Tripitaka, 3 baskets. See the terminology, we are talking about the terminology. So Pali Canon is the English term we use to identify the Tripitaka, 3 baskets. See the translations. Now they have established, they have become established in the language. So we are looking at the, you have to do this thing. You have to do a little research on Pali Canon, how Pali Canon came into being. Did the Buddha present Pali Canon? No. He was just giving his ideas, his conversations here and there. And later monks, they gathered together, excuse me, and then they developed the idea of 3 baskets, Tripitaka. They collected all those sayings and they arranged in such a way that they should be easily kept in memory and also easily transmitted. So we find the 3 baskets. They put into these 3 baskets, right? Sutra, Vinaya, and Abhidharma. Those are Pali terms. And these texts, the English officials in the imperial government, what they did was they found these texts and they took them to England, and they did a marvelous job of translating them into English. And they introduced some Buddhist terms. In their translations, you find a lot of Buddhist terms. I'm talking about 150 years, 170 years ago, this thing happened. And now, as time went by, different people translated these texts into English. So those days language is different from today's language. So different terms, right? Terminology is not the same every day. It changes over time. So Buddhist terminology from the Pali Text Society, the original organization that they started to translate these texts, the language that they used and the language that we use today, a little bit different, not too much different, but a little bit different. So standardization of the Buddhist terminology. This aspect we are going to look at in this class. But today's class, what you have to do on your own, identify the Buddhist texts. What are Buddhist texts and their origin and how they came into being. Basically, the Pali Tripitaka. So I hope you can easily find out these things in online. Pali Tripitaka, how it came into being. And we are not focusing on the terminology here, but a little bit of history and how it was transmitted. Pali Tripitaka, how it was transmitted to Sri Lanka and how it was preserved. Oral transmission, we usually talk about it. Oral transmission, the monks memorize these things and pass it to the other group of monks. And like that, it came into writing. They committed it to writing after like 400 years after the Buddha's passing. After the Buddha's passing, about 400 years later, the Buddhist texts were written down. Where? In Sri Lanka. So that is history. So let us look at this history a little bit. Then you can understand about the Buddhist texts. And then we can move on with the other classes. So please do a little research on the Pali Canon, its development and its survival. And then we will go on to how it was translated to look at that aspect, okay? So that is our class here, BMN 521, okay? With that, I wind up this little introduction. So get ready, welcome aboard. As time goes on. Oh, we won't be having class next week, I guess. 16th is a holiday. So we won't be having class next week, but we will be meeting on the 23rd. Yes, 23rd. So when that class comes, you have enough time, 2 weeks time, do the little research, okay? And if you have any questions, as usual, you can email me and ask questions. I guess that's it. Thank you so much. Have a nice week.